Good morning. On behalf of our team, I want to welcome you all. My name is Rob Guthrie, Vice President and Enterprise Sales Executive with Kaufman Hall. It's a real pleasure to be with you virtually today. As many of you know, Kaufman Hall released two new additions to the Axiom software platform late last year. Axiom Comparative Analytics, which will be the primary focus of today's session, and Axiom Strategy Management. Comparative analytics was created really as a result of two primary driving factors. First, our 2016 acquisition of a company called Total Benchmark Solutions, which gave us a really advanced data science tool and enabled us to respond with this tool. And secondly, you, our clients. Our clients had said for years that Kaufman Hall has so many budgeting clients and forecasting clients. Why can't you guys provide us with some good financial benchmarking information? And really, comparative analytics is a result of us listening and responding to that request. The market response to these new offerings has really been overwhelming. For some of you who were and others who weren't able to be at our Performance Management Summit last week, the comparative analytics session that we gave was actually our most highly attended session. And the clients that we've spoken with have really seen tremendous value in the approach we've taken and the overall value proposition. So because we have had so many different requests for on-site demonstrations all over the country, we wanted to offer you, our Axiom budgeting and forecasting cloud clients, an exclusive opportunity to attend this demonstration of comparative analytics today. Note that we've provided several educational sessions to date, but during today's session, we will be spending a pretty good amount of time in the product itself. Before we get started with the actual presentation, just one housekeeping note. Your audio is going to be muted during the presentation. Please submit any and all questions through your attendee interface, and we certainly hope and intend to leave some time at the end to address those questions that you have. With that, I would like to introduce Kaufman Hall Managing Director Jim Blake. Jim, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jim Blake, and thanks for that introduction, Rob. Data and math has been a passion of mine. I was a mathematician and participated on Wall Street in the data revolution that took place there in the 80s, and came over to healthcare and been interested in this ever since, and been working with many leading health systems in this area. Really happy to share with you what we have today, and also want to invite, I know doing the demo through webinar, if there's any follow-up questions, both you can type them in, but also you can give a call, and happy at any time to sit down and have a conversation. This is an area that's my life passion and really interested in. In addition to being managing director, I'm on the executive team of the firm, and I lead all of our data efforts. So not just comparative analytics, but our other efforts as well. I'm here with me today is Eric Swanson, one of our senior data scientists, and there's been many others involved as well. But Eric is going to assist me as we go through and talk to you today. In terms of the overall agenda, just going through the introduction. We'll go through a few background slides just to set the table of where does comparative analytics fit within the firm and data as well. We'll also then to give an overview of comparative analytics, which is primarily going over the unique value approach that we have to data and comparative analytics. And then we'll spend the majority of the time on the demo itself, and I'll be asking Eric to lead on that, and I'll add some color. And we may, if we have time, go over a few case studies of how folks are using it. But we want to make sure to leave time at the very end for questions that you have, and we look forward to following up with any additional questions. First, in terms of the vision of the firm, since the founding of the firm by Ken Kaufman and Mark Hall, we've always had in mind of really equipping healthcare leaders with the tools and advice and information needed to really quantify the financial impact of every decision. And this is right in line with that vision from the very beginning. So it's in our DNA of what we do. In terms of it, the firm has always been focused on helping clients solve their toughest problems, whether those be financial and now even clinical, as we get into various things of how financial and clinical are fully integrated in terms of problems. Today, you can't do that with consulting alone. We've discovered that many years ago. The firm got into software for that very reason, that there were things that were better done through the analytical power of software combined with consulting. But as we all know, in the last several years, the role of data in every day in our life, algorithms and data analytics is absolutely critical to really solving those toughest problems. So as a firm, we see huge value, and we hope that you do as well, of having that fully integrated. From a software viewpoint, before we spend the rest of the time just on comparative analytics, this is a schematic of our full software suite, from enterprise planning to management analytics to costing, decision support, and clinical analytics. From a data perspective, we have products within that clinical analytics place that we won't be going over today, but want to make sure you're fully aware of that. But comparative analytics firmly sits within as an add-on module to the full suite. And not only does it have derived power from being fully integrated, and we'll talk about that within the unique value approach, but it also provides value and makes all of the other component pieces be more valuable to you, and enhances each and every one of them, from financial planning to budgeting to capital planning, financial reporting, and labor productivity. In addition, the other newest product is strategy management, and the two of them were built to work together. Today, we don't have time to go over all those other pieces and that interaction, but happy to talk further with you on that. But we're going to focus the rest of the presentation and demo on comparative analytics. If you step back, every day our consultants are working with senior leadership, from the executive leadership all the way down to operational managers and department heads. And the need for quality, timely information and insight, the right information to the right person at the right time, is absolutely critical today, especially as health systems merge and become larger. Moving those aircraft carriers are all tougher if you have different sources of information from different time periods, and the confusion that can lead, and all the amount of work that you do analyzing, figuring out, and turning things around is a common problem. We've worked with many clients in terms of this need for the right analytics and data to guide strategic decisions every single day. And as Rob mentioned, we've heard both from those who are our software users to those who we're working with on a consulting basis that, could Kaufman Hall help them in this regard? And that is what we built this out of. Before we go into just comparative analytics, we wanted to look at Kaufman Hall from a data viewpoint in this illustrative graphic. On the left, in that cloud-shaped, is not all of the sources, but many of the sources of data that come in monthly and daily into Kaufman Hall. First and foremost is all of the CMS claims data we ingest into the firm. State databases, we get most of the state databases at this point as well, and it has significant amount of information from each and every healthcare system, every hospital, every provider, every delivery in many of those state databases. We also buy quite a bit of the various different payer claims data that's available, and we have over a majority of that payer claims data flowing through us. We also receive, through the use of our software, the general ledger, payroll, statistics, revenue usage, and other information, as well as clinical data from those clients that have taken on clinical, our Axiom Clinical Analytics product, which used to be called Peak. In addition to that, we buy from over 120 different firms, various different slices of data, that from everything from Moody's to Emma to Definitive to many, many others into the firm. Prior to our latest, to what we're doing now, that information was sort of just there. We've now, in the past several years, especially as Rob mentioned with the purchase of Total Benchmark, have a data management engine and now data factory that we ingest this information and handle it on a more rigorous methodology with data definitions, measure definitions, over 2,000 peer group definitions. And ultimately, because we developed this many years ago, decades ago, we would have developed it as a manual process and probably would still have a manual process. But developing it in today's modern world, we've used the latest in machine learning and hired the world's best from a data science perspective. We very much use the latest, and we've used it in a way that allows us to much more rapidly achieve what we'd call real time. And I'll get into that more in a moment. What do we do with all that we've taken is we use it and push into things that are both within the Axiom suite and some things that are not yet within the Axiom suite. On the right-hand side is illustrative of that. The top four, I'll leave for the rest of this presentation because those top four collectively form comparative analytics, and we'll take you through that in depth. Let me mention briefly the other four on the bottom. We have clinical analytics, which used to be called Peak, and does clinical variation, physician scorecards, and many other things. We have decision support as well, and cost accounting, where we use both ingest data and use data from these other sources to bring you superior product. And then not in Axiom, but it also tells you sort of the way we work and think about this. In the field, working with subject matter specialists, we have a great area led by nurse Therese Fitzpatrick and several data scientists in workforce optimization, where we're working not on the monthly basis, but actually on the hourly and every 15 minutes in terms of staffing. First rolled out in terms of nurse staffing, but now just general staffing in general, wherever it's variable. And we're actually able to optimize and find significant opportunity and value in helping of clients in that. Ultimately, I could see, as we continue to do that work with leading health systems, that we eventually would roll that into Axiom as well after it's battle tested and well built out. We also do performance improvement, and there's a large and growing area of very heavily data-driven performance improvement that we do with a variety of different clients. What is the unique value of our data approach? It's sort of interesting. One of our consumer experts, the person who leads our consumer practice, he'd gotten all this information, et cetera, and I'm not really good with really pithy consumer things, but he looked at all this and said, oh, that's real data, real insight, real time. Paul Krankovich, who I've known since college days, he's a leader in consumer and came here after leading a several thousand person consumer firm. That's the magic of being a consumer focused, of having that pithiness of that real data, real insight, real time. And you've seen that tagline if you've been looking at our National Hospital Flash Report. But let's unpack, what does that mean relative to our data approach? First, I'm going to take you through 3 slides of data approach, and probably in some ways this is as important, maybe even more important than the demo, is really understanding this approach that we have and the uniqueness of it. First, in terms of real data, real time, our data is real time. And what is real time in healthcare? And I think that it's important to differentiate in every industry, and I saw this when I worked on Wall Street with the data revolution there in the 80s and participated in that. Went from not a single screen on anybody's desk on the trading floor to within 3 years, there were 6 to 8 screens or more and Bloomberg won that war of that real-time data. Real-time there was defined as 15 minutes. Within point of care, point of sale, point of trade, that's sort of real-time. You're dealing with a patient, you're dealing with a trade, you're dealing with a sale. Kaufman Hall, as most of you know, we're an enterprise firm. We focus on the enterprises. So each of you, the many health systems, I think we have 30 or 40 on this call today, each of you have your real time. You're looking at right now, it's March 19th. I imagine almost all of you, if not all of you, you're all high performing entities. You have your February results. You may have 20 or 30 hospitals and you're saying, oh my God, hospital A, B, C, D, 8 of the 30 all underperformed in February. Do we have a market problem? Do we have a clinical service line problem? Do we have a leadership problem? How do you diagnose and understand that in real time? So real time for an enterprise level is having comparative analytics at the point where you have your information back. And that is our goal in time. We're about a week right behind that. And from all the clients that we've shown this, they've been ecstatic. Because up till now, real time has been that they get information 9 months after, which you really don't want to be solving February's problem in October. You're already worried more about October. So that's real time. Breadth and depth of measures, and Eric will go into more detail on this, but we have both internal and external performance measure at the entity level, at the department level, at the job code level, and we'll show you that in a few minutes. And we have it both from an actual as well as budget. Also, in terms of the data, it's what data. And we envision of having, and we have the data for the data packs across the total delivery continuum. Our first data pack that's up, ready, and out the door, and for those existing clients like yourself, is the hospital data pack, because it's still the single largest expenditure. And we're going to do each data pack and roll them out over the months. When they're ready, they've been statistically cleaned and thought through very carefully and roll them out. So in the future, we'll have a physician data pack and others as well. Single source of information. The early beta clients that we worked with, one of the really phenomenal client took a look at all that what we're doing and said, wow, this is amazing. Single source of information. So this really, kudos to that client, really seeing it, looking at it. And they said, hey, our CEO would read something in Modern Healthcare. They get a report from so-and-so with year-old or two-year-old information. We're asked to look into this problem. We get our financial analyst investigating it. We're looking at real-time for our own data. And we had this other competitor X data that's 9 months old, a year old, which was the industry standard before us coming out with this. And we couldn't even get it all to match up, much less. So we spent and wasted a lot of time investigating things. Your single source of information from the C-suite to the department manager is as valuable as real-time and breadth and depth. And so kudos to clients who've helped us with this and thought about that. We really want to communicate the right information to the right level at the right time to help you. I've already mentioned about being powered by advanced analytics and being fully integrated. So let's go on to the next slide. So not only do you have real data real time, you need to take it to real insight in real time and actually get it to real action. So what does that mean? If you have 9, 10 month, 1 year old data, there's only one thing you can do. It's sort of a cost cutting. In fact, we purposely named this comparative analytics, not benchmarks, because we really think it's important. People have sort of a thought in their mind of what something means when you call it benchmarks. Comparative analytics, there's things that we can do because of that real time that no other provider of data right now can do. They cannot help you diagnose and intervene in real time. Let that sink in. You've got a February problem. Do you have a leadership problem? Do you have a service line problem? Do you have a market problem? You need to know that in real time. You can't wait 9 months and then find out. You need to diagnose. I love the TV show House. I don't know if any of you like it. Diagnosing is the key to doing a turnaround in real time. better diagnosis and performance variances and understanding it. The other thing I want to make sure is that we have a thing where some people talk about variances as opportunities. I don't think of it that way at all. The comparative analytics shows you variances and helps you understand at a very deep level, deeper than any other competitor, to understand and get at, and with that understanding, forming a good diagnosis. That's not an opportunity, it's a diagnosis to turn around. Faster realization of results is the key to all of this. It also, in addition to that, people need to have better budgeting processes. There's a lot of frustration out of that. People looking for, do I scrap budgeting? Do I go to rolling forecasting? Do I do this? Do I do that? But if you have the right information informing the budget process, it can be a much improved process in and of itself. And last but not least, it's still that deep dive of understanding performance improvement. Identification gets a lot of fanfare, but we think that's only the beginning, not the end. And what we've done is not only can we do the identification, but because of how we integrate with our full suite, we have, and we're going to continue over the next several months and years, continue to build in the strength of sustainability, because people, time and again, when they do those deep dives, it creeps back in because they don't build it into sustainability. All of this together, diagnosing and intervening, improving the budget process, and having that sustainability, all of it builds a better understanding and ultimately fosters a culture of continuous improvement. You may like what you heard on the first two slides, but you'll say, hey, I don't have the bandwidth, don't have the time, don't have the money, all those different types of things that I got so much in front of me. We're always all so busy we can't improve things. One of the things that's probably one of the best, and tell you quite frankly, it's why everybody we've shown this to has been buying it, is that the implementation and cost to do it is so low. It's really easy. And I got to tell you, I keep putting on this really easy in red here, and Rob and everyone else keeps taking off. It's not Kaufman Hall, like, well, it's not that. I find it funny, but it really is really easy. So we have, it's extremely easy to implement, very limited client bandwidth needed to implement. Also, administratively, think about this. If your health system and you've got budgeting and you got and other parts of the Kaufman Hall Axiom suite, you have some 800 users, and you sit there and say, oh my gosh, all of those people are already on the system. Nurse Joe is only allowed to see 2 departments. Well, when Nurse Joe pulls this up, they'll see exactly 2 departments information, versus some others just open everybody up to like a big thing of everybody's information, everybody's data, which is not helpful to you. So there's no additional administrative need. In terms of maintenance, there's no long surveys, there's no long data submission, there's no normalizing of your data to the other outside definitions. If you just use and this product is only for our existing clients, so if you use our products, which you are by definition, because you wouldn't be on this call otherwise, then you're doing everything you need to maintain it, which is pretty phenomenal. The rest is done by machine learning and advanced analytics. Easy to learn and use. First, familiarity with Axiom. You don't have to relearn how to use Axiom. Your people are already using it. Second, as maybe the most important on this whole slide in some ways, is many others have approached this in a way that either, one, give you raw data, which doesn't help you, or they give you data where you have to normalize to their definition, and you have some 1,300-page manual, and you have to have experts in that manual, and you probably can save yourself many, many FTEs right there alone. There is no manual. We define things and deliver back through machine learning to your definition. Extremely helpful. We're seeing huge benefits already with clients from that. It's very beneficial. And last, because it's an add-on module, it's priced as an add-on module, which is extremely advantageous, and that's something you can have further discussions with Rob or Stephanie or whoever is your software and data salesperson in terms of that. But there's a real return on investment. Now let's talk about it and get into the actual comparative analytics. As you'll see on slide 15, there's several component pieces, and it works as an ecosystem. That reinforces that single source of timely information. We have 4 component pieces. We have a National Hospital Flash Report, and that's the only piece that you can buy separately and independently from the rest, or if you get comparative analytics, you get that included. And that is for the CEO, the board, the C-suite, or your local C-suite management for that. And it comes with many subscriptions to it. And we're getting kudos for that alone. Second is the Hospital Performance Report, which sort of takes the information from the previous one, but maps all of your data, mapped in the same format, et cetera, but to that. And Eric will be showing you each and every one of these component pieces. Third is a deep dive departmental report, which we deliver both for those financial analysts, but also some clients have used it and sliced it up and have it delivered to each of the department managers. And last is the comparative analytics deeper dive software, and there's sort of 2 flavors within that. One, if you're that department manager, you just see your metrics and your cards and says, hey, need to improve length of stay this month. Conversely, there's also a more open-ended data explorer, which allows you to explore data on a more free-form basis, more for your decision support type of people and your financial analyst type of folks. So again, works as a suite from the highest level to the operating level, and has everyone looking at the same information and being able to suss out problems, diagnose, and turn things around. I'm going to ask Eric Swanson now if he can take us through each of those, and then we come back to you all with some questions.
Great, Jim, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you all for joining us on this webinar. I'm excited to take you through these 4 major components as Jim has outlined. Again, we'll start with the National Hospital Flash Report and work our way towards the comparative analytics tool. So to begin with, the National Hospital Flash Report is a new digital monthly subscription that we provide every month, and as Jim said, in near real time, generally only a few days, about a week or so after most organizations close their books. This has been extremely popular. It's being read by hundreds of providers at the moment, 100 provider organizations, hundreds of subscribers. And beyond the providers as well, it's also being read by the rating agencies, it's being read by investors, as well as other third-party groups. And so, again, what this report does is it replaces the state-of-the-art anecdotal basis of how did the country perform last month, how did my region perform, how did my bed size perform last month, and replaces it with statistically sound data to really show you exactly what occurred. So within this report, again, it's sampling over 650 hospitals across the country. And again, as we mentioned to you, it's provided shortly after you close your books. In fact, the next issue will be released to our subscribers this week. So within the National Hospital Flash Report, we cover a number of different sections. And I'll show you some examples of this today. The first is the perspective. And the perspective, if you only have 2 minutes to read this report and you want an executive summary of what was the performance last month, what were some of the key areas that I should be focused on, the Kaufman Hall perspective is the place to go to. If you want to drill a little bit deeper and have more time to read and discover some of the very rich information contained within this report, you can then browse and peruse the remaining sections, which include profitability, volume, revenue, expense, non-operating performance, as well as predictions for next month. We also include in each issue a special topical piece that we call the Spotlight, which is, again, focused on those issues that are most important to you during any given point across the year. And we approach them from an analytical perspective, so you can begin to think about how would you apply some of those learnings from those spotlights to your organizations. So to begin with, I'll go to the Kaufman Hall perspective. And what you'll see on this perspective, again, is a lot of valuable insight. And the insight in this report is written by our team of subject matter specialists, which are our consultants, experts in this field, who are on the ground working with you all and other clients every day. And so they read the data each month. They've been reading the data for the last year, and they're able to provide some really interesting insight as to what has occurred last month. What are some interesting trends? What are some nuances that our clients and organizations really need to be focused on to perform at their highest levels? And again, you will see that included throughout this report. If you want to dive a little bit deeper, going beyond the perspective section, as I mentioned, you can drill into all these other components of this report. And so the first here is profitability. And within each of these subsections of the report, you'll see we've broken it out in 3 major ways. The first is national observations, second being regional observations, and third being bed size observations. And what we're hearing from our clients and the folks who are subscribed to this report is that it's providing them real value to be able to compare themselves nationally, regionally, or by bed size. Again, as Jim mentioned earlier, it helps to answer some of those questions. Is this a market issue? Is this potentially an issue with my own organization? So within the national observations, we include a variety of KPIs for each section, and I'll show you some of those today. And within each of those KPIs, we also look at the budget variance, the month-over-month change, as well as the year-over-year change. And so, again, really importantly, it allows you to understand, well, how is this month compared with last month? How is this month compared with this similar month a year ago? And because we also include the budget information, how have others done relative to their budget? Some really interesting insight that comes from this. Additionally, for those of you who are a little bit more statistically inclined, we include some box and whisker plots that you're able to pull up and look at those distributions of those changes. And again, this is also really valuable in telling you how tight or wide was the spread of performance. In some months, you'll actually see that those performance measures are really tight, and in some cases, they're really wide. And again, lends to some very interesting insight that you can read throughout these reports. If we scroll down into the breakout by region, you'll begin to see these 4-quadrant graphs, and you'll find these graphs throughout the report. And we've purposely plotted this information in a very consistent way across the report, such that as you begin to learn how to read these graphs, which is very easy, you can begin to conceptualize and understand what this information means each month. And so within these graphs, what you'll see is along the x-axis, you'll see budget variance, and along the y-axis, you'll see the year-over-year change. And so in many of these cases, you can look to see at which quadrant do my points fall, or does the nation or bed size or region fall, to get an understanding of what's occurring. What you'll see here for operating EBITDA margin, we're looking at our percent change, and you can see a variety of performance across the regions, with the West being in the lower left-hand quadrant, the Great Plains being in the upper right-hand quadrant. So again, begins to indicate to us already that in those 2 regions, they're experiencing some different trends. It's also really important and worth noting that as we produce these graphics, we are sampling each of these regions relative to the overall national composition of hospitals, such that what you are seeing here really is reflective of what's occurring nationally, regionally, and by bed size. And again, to scroll down, you can look at this breakout by bed size as well. I want to spend a few minutes to drill into some of the indicators that we include. I mentioned to you that within each section, there's a variety of KPIs that are included, some of these being the most important that organizations are asking for. But also really importantly, as we've continued to write this report, we listen to our subscriber base. We listen to you all as our clients to understand what are some of these KPIs and measures that you would like to include in the report, and what are those areas that you're interested in. And so this is a document that continues to grow over time to suit the needs of you all as our readers. So as an example here, we're now looking in the volume section. You can see we've got some valuable insight on these. But to drill down on one of these that might be of interest to you all is looking at ED visits. And so we see our budget variance being unfavorable for last month. We see month-over-month change being favorable to the month prior. And finally, we see an unfavorable year-over-year change. And so this is consistent with some of the trends we saw across all of last year, that we're seeing declining ED visits, some declining inpatient volumes. And again, really important to understand that, wow, we're seeing a large decrease in visits, and we're also seeing that unfavorable budget. And so this is telling us that even as conservative as folks have budgeted for nationally, the number of ED visits actually was reduced by a greater amount. I'll just briefly show you here that, again, within each of these sections, you can switch through all of those KPIs and look at them on a similar graph plotted similarly. And again, you can see there are a lot of points here in the lower left-hand quadrant for ED visits, indicating, again, unfavorable budget variance performance as well as unfavorable year-over-year performance. Each month, we write a special spotlight, as I mentioned to you. In this most recent spotlight, we focused on all of 2018 as a whole and looked at the trends that occurred across all of 2018. And again, really valuable that we're able to provide that information in a near real-time basis and give you some insight just alongside as rating agencies and others are reading this report. But I want to demonstrate to you some of the richness of what's included in these various spotlight sections. And so, as I mentioned, February, we wrote a 2018 year in review. The prior 2 months, we really focused in on what we called the Goldilocks zone of budgeting, or understanding how well do organizations budget, where do they not budget well, what are some of the main ways that an organization can budget a little bit better. Some really interesting findings there. We focused on changes of 340B, changes to the evaluation management codes, some consumerism pieces. Again, really spanning the gamut of all the areas that may be important to you. And all the way back in June, our spotlight topic was on workforce optimization. So if what you heard earlier is Jim talking about going down to that hourly or even 15-minute level of optimizing your workforce piques your interest, then you can read a short piece on it here in the spotlight as well.
And a real differentiator, it's not just a short piece, but we then take, the actual live data and run it against it. And that's been very helpful to many clients who might be thinking about 340B or whatever the issue might be, and say, oh, okay, this is how you thought about it. You ran it against all this data. I can see by region and by hospital size, and then I'm doing it for myself. Really sparks a lot of really good discussion. We didn't have the time to take you through all the KPIs on revenue and expenses and the non-operating, et cetera, as well as the predictive analytics for how next month will go. But it's gotten a huge reception, and this digital publication is funny. The #1 requested things by CEOs is that they can print it. So if you get a group subscription, we allow you to print, as well as we include a data pack and chart pack that many health systems have now built into their own monthly dashboards, et cetera, those charts and graphics, et cetera, and are using it for the report out that they do to their board or internally, et cetera. So we had a huge reception, and it's very exciting, and it's totally consistent with all the other things we're now going to take in as we dive deeper down.
Yep, thank you, Jim. So now that you have read and have seen the National Hospital Flash Report, the next logical question that you may be asking yourself is, well, I really want to understand how has my organization performed relative to these other KPIs that I just read about in the National Hospital Flash Report. And so for that, we switch to the next component within the comparative analytics suite, which is called the Hospital Performance Report. And the purpose of this Hospital Performance Report is to essentially unblind your organization's data and plot it alongside those very similar comparative analytic reference points you read in the National Hospital Flash Report. Now, what I'll mention about the next several screens that I'll show is that within the Hospital Performance Report, because it's part of the Axiom suite, it's available to you in a variety of formats. And so the first format is through an Axiom report, similar to those that many of you will be already familiar with, and that is what I'm showing you today. So you're seeing it as an Axiom report. It can also be presented as a PDF for those of you who have smaller organizations and don't necessarily want to run this on demand. And then finally, for the largest organizations on the phone, this can also be delivered as a BI or through a BI tool, either Power BI or Tableau, to provide you a little bit more interactivity. So again, very useful for organizations of all sizes, and we're finding that many organizations are choosing those options to suit their needs the best. And again, as with all Axiom administration, all that administration is already complete if you have been using our tools, which you all are. And so you're able to deliver the right information to the right person with very little effort. This is really fully automated. So what you will now see within this report is you will now see a number of red dots that have appeared. And what these red dots represent is they represent the unblinded data of your organization. And so you can now actually see comparisons across all these different KPIs and across all these major sections, just as you read in the National Hospital Flash Report, but you can see it with your data plotted right alongside. So again, at the bottom of this report, the Axiom version of the report, you'll see similar sections as in the National Hospital Flash Report. As an example, here in the volume section, you can look at a very similar chart looking at the ED visits. And just as we saw in the National Hospital Flash Report, we saw some bed size, some regional trends, some national trends of declining ED visits year over year and being under budget. You'll see those same points plotted here, but now you'll see them alongside your own hospitals. And again, why this is really critical and really helpful is that you can very quickly assess what organizations are doing well, what organizations can learn from each other, so on and so forth. The other important thing about the hospital performance report is that we have the ability to customize this a little bit more to your needs. And so one of the main questions that folks have asked of us is they said, well, we'd really rather look at this on a year-to-date basis rather than the current month. And so we're able to modify these graphics very easily for that. Again, noting that the hard part is getting all the data ready. The easy part is just displaying it. And so again, the hospital performance report is able to be customized to your needs. So again, really interesting here. If we look at our hospital performance report, we're seeing some of our own hospitals are falling in this bottom left-hand quadrant for ED visits. So the next logical question would be is, well, I want to understand a little bit further at each of these entities, what's occurring with the departments that are making up these entities and the departments that are adding to these variety of KPIs, what's occurring and how do I understand if there's potentially some areas that I need to focus on? So for that, we switch to our third component of comparative analytics, which is what we call the detailed department report. Now, again, just to show you the variety of methods this can be delivered, I'm now presenting this to you as a PDF. But again, this is also presented through an Axiom report as well, should you wish. Now, Jim spoke earlier about the breadth and depth of our measures and our standard departments and our peer groups, and I will get into that further as we move through the tool. But what I think you will see here is that we aim to provide comparison points for as close to 100% of your organization as possible. And we have over 500 standard departments, including many of those which our other competitors have not tackled, specifically even some of those overhead areas. But then within each of these departments, we produce up to actually 1,000 individual metrics that you can begin to focus on. So I won't belabor this, but just to show you that for a sample organization, you know, we're able to produce for their 1,500 departments, we're able to map 1,500 departments within our tool and actually provide some comparative information. But importantly, you don't have to read this entire report. You're able to look at some summary pages that show you high to low variances across a variety of KPIs that I'll show you, as well as access some of this information through the comparative analytics tool and under the Data Explorer.
And as part of the demo, we're showing you, we showed one in Axiom report because we know that quite a few of the health systems that are on this webinar and call are really champs at wanting and using Axiom reporting. We also, some of the smaller health systems more like things in PDFs, which this is a PDF. And then some of the largest health systems you really want to, and you're driven to, whether it's Power BI or Tableau into BI, and we can deliver this as a BI as well. So there's different methodologies of delivery. What 85, 90% of the work is getting the data right. And that's where we've spent our time, is the quality of the data is job one. And that's the easy part, is the display methodology. And just wanted to let you all know that. And that's something that we're purposely showing you a couple of different methodologies. It is not a one size fits all in terms of how you want it delivered and who you want it delivered to. But as you've known with Axiom, that's one of the great strengths of flexibility that you have there.
Yep. Thank you, Jim. So within each of these detailed department reports, you're presented with a one-page dashboard. And what these dashboards include is they provide some really relevant information to your individual department managers, or for those of you in the financial analysts or decision support areas, also provide some very useful information to you. And again, this spans a variety of KPIs, drilling a little bit deeper than what we just saw in the hospital performance report across both labor, non-labor, and total. And so within labor, you can now see indicators for productivity, for overtime percent, wage rate, PTO rate. For non-labor, again, some of the natural class breakouts, supplies, drugs, other expense, as well as total expense. In this example here, we're looking at an emergency room. And what you'll see at the very top is a graph that is showing our worked hours per visit, with the worked hours per visit being the unit of service for the emergency room in this case, over time, over the last 3 years. Now, you'll recall in both the National Hospital Flash Report and the Hospital Performance Report that I just showed you, we saw a lot of areas where ED visits were declining. And the ED visits for this individual department are represented by the gray bars in the background. And in fact, you can see, indeed, there's a decline in ED visits. But with that decline in ED visits, we're also seeing that our productivity, our worked hours per visit, are increasing over time. And so this department already appears that perhaps it is not flexing appropriately with those volumes. What you'll also see on this are two horizontal lines, and these represent the comparative analytics points. So again, those external reference points at both the 75th and 25th percentile. So you can see those here. And again, to give you a sense of, well, how do I perform against an external peer group?
So this place used to be down at the 25th, and now with lowering volumes, they're up at the 75th and getting worse. That's a pretty big switch over the last 12 months.
That's right. That's right. And what's also very useful about this, again, is, as we mentioned, you have the ability to select any number of peer groups for your entities. We have up to 2,000 built-in peer groups already, of which we assign 5 peer groups to each entity automatically, and then give you the ability to customize or select another 5 for each entity. And so that's how you begin to select your external peer groups. You can select the percentile or the performance thresholds at which you want to view those external benchmarks. And you can also look at internal benchmarks. And so these internal reference points can be looking at yourself over time, so historically. But for some very large organizations, what they've also requested of us is they said, we would actually like to look across our system and do internal comparisons across our system. And so, again, these fields can also be used for that. And we're able to create peer groups based upon your own organizations if you want to achieve such type of comparison. Additionally, what you'll see on the right-hand side are some box and whisker plots. The blue lines in each of those graphs represents the external reference points, the external comparative analytics. The green represent the internal comparative analytics, and that little vertical red line represents your own department. And so, again, in a very easy-to-use fashion, department managers can look at this report, look at anywhere where they might see that red line, far off to the right, or see any large differences between the blue and the green, to begin to quickly understand maybe there's some areas I want to focus in on. There's also a table presented that shows you those raw values and also shows you some variances converted into dollars in this case. But again, really importantly, as Jim mentioned, these are not opportunities. These are some objective variances that, again, allow you to begin to prioritize and understand where you may want to focus. Again, just to quickly show you here that, again, these graphics are produced across a variety of departments. Again, in this case, there could be up to 1,500 of these, but again, these would be sent and delivered to the individuals responsible for each area. So back in our emergency room, again, we saw that there might be some productivity shifts that have been occurring over time. We might also note that, hey, our wage rate looks a little high. You know, we've got some questions about our non-labor expense. And so what we really want to understand is how do we dive even deeper still and understand what are some of the root causes? How do I understand where the problems may lie within my department and actually begin to do that diagnosis and intervention? So for that, we switch over to our comparative analytics tool, or these cloud-based diagnostic tools. As Jim mentioned to you, there are really two major components of this. The first being the Metric Explorer, which is a dashboard that I'll show you here in a minute, that again provides the right information to the right person at the right time. There's also a Data Explorer that allows a much more free-form analysis if you have more difficult questions that you'd like to ask. And finally, we also include a Peer Explorer piece, which allows you to graph two variables against each other and see some of the relationships, again, to answer even tougher questions yet. So to begin with, I will start with the Metric Explorer. So just as with all of our tools, we mentioned to you that we have a breadth and depth of measures. So within each of these dashboards, you can look at both an entity and department level, and I'll show you both today. Within each of these major sections, again, being consistent with not only the single source of information that we've been speaking about, but also the other reports that I've just shown you, you'll see similar breakouts at the top of expense, revenue, labor, volume, and financial sections. Again, you can begin to explore some very useful information. I'm here right now in a entity level card. This happens to be for a certain hospital. I'm looking at a national peer group and a certain period. And each of these cards contain a lot of really valuable information for your managers. The first is this icon in the middle. These icons represent performance to budget. So if you're within a certain threshold to budget, you'll see a yellow check mark. If you're outperforming or performing better than budget, you'll get a nice green check. And then if you're underperforming budget, you'll get a red exclamation point. So again, some visual cues that help drive your managers very quickly as to what are those areas that I might want to focus in on from a budget perspective. These cards also contain the actual value of the metric in questions, in this case, total expense per patient day at this entity. You can see your budget variance. You can see that comparison to that external reference point. So in this case, the percentile is at the 30th percentile. And really importantly as well is not only can you show statically where you fall relative to those external reference points, you can also show the direction in which you're trending relative to them. So in this case, this percentile is falling. Now, for a lot of organizations, one of the main questions we have is they say, my managers don't all have the financial acumen to read and understand this, and so we try to make this as easy as possible. So when thinking about percentiles in your performance, we go with a classroom grading type system such that the lower percentiles are worse and the higher percentiles are better. And again, that's consistent across all of our KPIs. That's consistent with quality scores. And again, makes it very easy for your department managers to read and interpret if they aren't used to looking at this type of information already. You can select any of these cards and start to see these graphs below. And again, you can show or hide any number of peer groups as compared to your own data if you'd like to look at them. So again, very useful from a visual perspective. And also within each of these cards, if you click this little icon on the upper right, it will show you where your value falls across the spectrum of performance, as well as what is that variance to the next percentile. So this will tell you if you wanted to go from the 30th to the 35th, what would it take in order to move this KPI to that level. So I'm going to spend a few minutes to show you a little bit more about the depth and breadth of our measures. So we were just looking at an entity level screen, and so what I'm now switching over to is a department level screen. So your folks at your organization can very easily switch over to a department level. They can then switch to any number of hospital that they'd like to look at. And again, this is all controlled by security and permissions so that are already established. So if there's only one department that they should see or that they're responsible for, that it'll be the only department they're able to look at. And finally, then they can choose amongst the departments that they have within their area of responsibility. And again, you can see in this case, we have several hundred standard departments already included. So following the same story, we'll switch to our emergency room. We've chosen a national peer group and a current time period that we'd like to look at. And when doing this, now what you'll see is we've added an additional card. So these cards are dynamic to your organization. So we mentioned that we deliver the information back in a very similar way that you all think about the data. So the data is the same. So in other words, we normalize that external data to yours. And what you'll see now is we have a total expense per visit card that shows up. So depending on the type of unit of service that you measure across any number of departments, you will find external reference points, these external comparative analytics that match up right alongside. So in this case, being an ED, we've got a total expense per visit. Now, what you're also able to do, and this really highlights the depth of our measures, is you're able to actually drill down to a job code and pay type level to understand what is occurring and how may I be different than others, to again, really drive a deep, deep and rich diagnosis. And this level of comparative analytics is just not available elsewhere in this real-time format, and in some cases, not at all. So now what we're looking at is we're looking at the job codes within our individual ED in this example. And you'll see we've got them broken out. So here are therapists and nurses. We've got some executives, medical and health service managers, financial specialists, so on and so forth. And again, what you're able to see here by looking at these cards is we're seeing a lot of these red exclamation points, again, indicating to us some potential issues, very similar to what we just saw in the detailed department report. You can see that these nursing work hours per unit of service have really increased pretty heavily over time, similar to the chart we saw earlier. And you can also tell from that classroom grading score that the number of nurses in this department is relatively rich as compared with the peer group in question. So again, already now this is providing a level of diagnosis that I've already honed in on a certain class or level of job code. You can also look over at our medical and health services managers and look at where they sit relative to some external peers. They're below the median, again, indicating that potentially richer area. And so the combination of those two will help explain what we were seeing with some of those wage rate variances, what we were seeing with some of the inflexibility, if you will, of the department. So again, very quickly, we've been able to drill down all the way from a national hospital flash report to an individual departmental level, done some real deep diagnosis, have a lot of useful information at your manager's fingertips that they can use to enact change. The other really important piece about these dashboards is it really democratizes all this data, as Jim mentioned earlier. And again, this puts the power in the hands of your operators, and it puts it in their hands at the right time so they can really make some changes. So next, I will transition from our Metric Explorer, which is the dashboard, over to our Data Explorer, which allows for a much more free-form analysis for those of you who are financial analysts, decision support, or sit in any of those business offices that is often asked to do this type of work. So what you'll see here is, again, you have a very easy to use filter that allows you to select, well, do I want to look at an entity or department level? And again, you can choose that. You now have the ability to choose any number of hospitals within your system. You can choose one, you can choose many, you can choose them all. You can also choose any number of standard departments. So here is that list of the 500 or so standard departments. In this case, I'll just select emergency room as an example. Maybe one of the questions I want to ask is, how does my ED productivity vary across my organization and who's doing the best and who's doing the worst. You can choose any number of peer groups you'd like to include, as well as you can come in here and choose any metric. So I want to choose a labor metric. I mentioned to you I want to look at my worked hours per visit. So I can select from my labor category, now my worked hours per visit. And again, you can select any number of categories, any number of measures that you want to pull in.
And while Eric's doing that, one of the things is to mention to you is that you also can do 5 custom peer groups, and ultimately we're going to continue to add and explore many variations on peer groups. But right now, not only do you get the 5 standard, you get 5 custom.
That's right. And so now, very quickly, I've been able to bring in a number of department-level metrics. You'll be able to see them here by each hospital. Really useful in these reports is you can now sort these from high to low. So you can look at your actual values, you can look at your budget, you can sort by budget variance. If you're really interested in knowing, well, how does my bed size peer group compare with my actuals, you can actually drag and reorder these columns. And so, again, this allows you a really rich experience. And for those of you familiar with some of the other competitive products around this area, this is essentially the analog to that, but provides you a lot more richness in the ability to move this data around. And additionally, you can also select a lot of metrics at once. You can select a lot of areas you want to focus at, and the performance is extremely good here. Finally, I'll just mention for you analytical folks as well, you can export all this data out to Excel should you like to incorporate it in some other type of analysis that you're using. And really, really importantly here is because you're using comparative analytics that's driving the single source of information, if you have multiple questions that are coming in, multiple people are trying to solve somewhat similar questions, they'll have very repeatable results by going through this process, even when you export that data out to your own analyses. And so, again, this provides a lot of information, not only from those external comparative points, but it also cleans and classifies your own data such that you have consistency across internal information as well.
In fact, it's interesting, some of the early adopters have found that it's helped them clean up their own data substantially in ways that they didn't even fully get till they started playing with it, and that they've said that alone was extremely valuable. You want to show real quickly Peer Explorer, and then we'll move on to a few other items.
Yep. So very quickly to round out this discussion then is the Peer Explorer. I mentioned to you earlier that this allows you to plot multiple metrics across each other. The easiest way to think of this report is a very highly customized version of the hospital performance report that you can do yourself. And so again, you can plot any number of those metrics that I just showed you, the up to 1,000 metrics at both the department and NED level, and show the relationships on both an X and Y basis. And so, you can begin asking yourself really interesting questions here. What are my relationship between net patient service revenue per adjusted patient day and expense across a variety of my entities? Or perhaps I want to look at productivity based upon a certain volume indicator across a number of departments within a functional area. So again, this allows you to answer and develop some graphics very, very quickly that help you guide solving and diagnosing some really tough, difficult questions. So with that really takes you through the full suite of tools all the way from the National Hospital Flash Report, where we take a national level, we then look at it across our own organization at the hospital performance level. We peel back the onion a little bit more at the detailed department report to understand where we may want to focus, and then finally ending with that comparative analytics to do that deep dive diagnosis, help drive those data for implementation and sustainability as well.
And one of the questions we've gotten in this type of demo going through is understanding the different users. So Eric was logged in as a general administrator, seeing everything. If you have a person that's at a particular level and they log into it, they'll only see the data at what level you allow them to. So they will see when they pull up that metric explorer, it might be the 7 cards. You want them focused on the metrics that they're constantly looking at. That's all they'll see. There's no exploring around because they're highly, highly focused. They've got a job to do. You want them in and out doing their job with good metrics, with good data, internal and external comparative data, but doing their job, versus somebody in the finance staff, you want them to be able to freeform and go around and look at everything. So, and then the C-suite looking at these higher level reports that are very relevant to them, but are consistent with in terms of the investigation. When we go to the next slide, that's on the demo, the one after. So we have here two quick case studies we'll go over quickly, and then we'll make sure to leave time for questions. You know, out in the field, how is this being used? And we just got two examples. And the first one, a large academic medical center, a top 21, who's very sophisticated with the use of data, both on the financial, labor, and clinical side, and has used many different products. They really had taken on a fairly large community entity and really wanted to frame discussions of looking at the corporate overhead and shared services. And they had drilled down with other products, and they weren't really able to get much evidence-based, fact-driven information to really help them go further. They brought us in. It was sort of funny. They saw the National Hospital Flash Report and called us. It was a cold call. And they said, hey, do you have data in this area? And we said, yeah, we do. And we went and spent time with them. The data was able to help them to look at and understand corporate overhead, one of those tougher areas at department levels that previously had not been known and shown, and they're able to get down to thinking of this from an organizational structure, from organizational basis, and really a skill mix basis as well, and really better understand and think about, and really, again, never want to think of any of this as it's an opportunity. It's really a variance that starts a meaningful discussion and help drives evidence-based, fact-driven information. And they have found this extremely helpful and are very praising of what they were able to achieve with it. Maybe, Eric, if you want to take this one and quickly reflect, and then we'll have about 15 minutes left for questions, and happy to. So get your fingers write some questions to us. We look forward to it. If you start writing it now, then by the time Eric's done, we'll have a few questions. Nothing worse than getting to the end of this and having no questions from any of you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. So in this second case here, this is a case study in which an organization was a large regional health system, and they recently acquired a community health system, or were in the process of acquiring a community health system. And what they really wanted to understand was, where did any potential synergy lie between the two organizations? And again, spanning functional areas, not only from corporate areas, but as well as nursing, the ancillary support, and even some of their clinics. And so the way they used comparative analytics in this was, A, to very quickly classify and map that data. So again, we talked about that advanced machine learning. This was used to create that alignment between the two systems, as well as with many of the departments, some of them had different key units of service that they were using. And so comparative analytics was able to bridge the gap in many of these cases where it could pull together the information needed to be able to provide the organization some comparative points, not only what they could achieve together from a synergistic perspective, but as well from an external perspective. And again, this went all the way down to even individual nursing units and clinics to be able to do so. What was really useful and why they got so much value out of this was the speed and rapidity at which this was able to be done. And so, as I mentioned to you, as they were going through this acquisition project, even prior to closing, they had already been able to use comparative analytics data to understand where did those synergies potentially lie, and begin to actually develop that roadmap even before they had closed. So it helped really guide their strategic plans. And again, additionally as well, just the ability to have that single source of information, that consistency between two organizations that were previously two, that were becoming one, was extremely useful, and again, provided some really robust conversations within the organizations as they move forward.
So as we've showed you with like workforce optimization, et cetera, our subject matter specialists have been in the field using this. They use the tools. We have found that the work that they've done historically that could take several months, they now can do it fairly quickly, almost instantaneously, of having it and getting to the core of the issue, which is getting to the understanding and insight, using that information to drive the meaningful discussion, rather than spending all your time trying to line up the dates, line up the data, understand the data, and understand the fact that the data is from different sources such that you can't even really talk about it. So that is a huge benefit in and of itself, and we've had a lot of experience now, and it's been beneficial for us. So we've had our own return on investment immediately with this, and we hope that you would too. So why don't we stop here, and hopefully at least one of you sent a question. I'd be awfully embarrassed if I didn't get a single question, but we also, even if they don't have questions right now, happy to follow up on future calls and meetings, etc. And always just reach out first and foremost to your representative, your data and software salesperson, so we can process those efficiently. But we're always available. Rob and John.
Great, thank you, Eric and Jim, for the presentation and overview. We do have several questions, so we'll go ahead and get into them. And first off, I'll say some have asked if they can get a copy of the presentation. We will be happy to send out. We have recorded the session. We'll be happy to send out a link to the recording to all of you who joined us today to be able to revisit the content, to perhaps share it with some of your colleagues who weren't able to join the live session today. So we will be circling back with you on that. Please rest assured. As far as questions, we'll start off with the one, if a client decided to purchase the comparative analytics software, how quickly can they get this up and running? Can you share some insight on that, please?
Sure, happy to give you some. First, the actual process is extremely easy, as we talked about earlier. Your data's already been run through both a brute force as well as a machine learning. We have it classified. We need a confirmation of that classification. There's some training, but after that, we can just be up and running and turn the whole thing on. And typically 30 days, maybe 45 on your timing, mostly on your timing of that, in terms of the getting it going. But the one thing we do have quite a few interests right now, so it's also scheduling, but the actual process is like a 30-day process. It's just a matter of scheduling.
Great. And attendees are interested to know, does an organization need to use Axiom budgeting to find the product useful? Can you elaborate on that as well?
Yes, it's only right now, it's an add-on module, and the use of the budgeting and reporting packages, if you only use, say, I'm just going to make this up, and in fact, should be nobody on this call because we only invited people who are on budgeting and reporting. But if you happen to have a friend and they're only using financial forecasting, then this is not for them. We're only selling this as an add-on module to those people using the existing products that we have.
Right. Thank you, Jim.
But come talk to us and we can talk about it and see if you have some. There may be a few people that are in unique circumstances that are on our software, but the way in which you're using it, you may have, there's various variations in how people are budgeting or rolling forecasting, et cetera, and we can have that deeper dialogue and discussion with you. Or maybe you're on maybe the implication is that you're on one of our older packages, old Axiom or old Kaufman Hall versus the new Axiom. So again, that might be worth an actual phone call with us to really understand what the nuance of that question is.
Great, thank you. Another question, can we compare the performance of a certain metric or department across the organization? Yeah, so thank you for that. The answer is yes, of course. So there's a few different ways you do that. I actually showed briefly one example within the Data Explorer where you can compare that across your organization. That's one option. The second is in that Peer Explorer, which was the visual view where you plot the X and Y. You can also do comparisons there. And then finally, as I mentioned, one of the questions that's been posed to us by a large organization is they said, we'd like to compare across our organization, but we don't necessarily want individuals knowing which areas of our organization they're being compared against, individual regions, if you will. And so we're also able to create custom peer groups or peer group, if you will, based upon that within your own organization to do those comparisons. So absolutely you can do that. There's really about 3 different ways that you could do it, and it all depends on what type of question you're trying to answer.
As well as creation of custom metrics. We had one person who said, oh, adjusted discharges, that's from the 70s. I know we still use it. I hate it, blah, blah, blah. And they really wanted to explore other metrics, and you can create custom metrics, as well as we would welcome folks, many have asked for, to be on like a council with us and explore with other leading health systems these questions of what are the right metrics to use. That's something we have a point of view on. We don't force our point of view. We support what your point of view is. That's a big differentiation, but we are happy to have that discussion. I'm a data geek, and I'm happy to have that kind of discussion anytime with anybody on this over a beer.
And further to that point, Jim, another attendee was wondering if we determine there's an opportunity within a particular area of our hospital, would we be able to participate in peer-to-peer conversations with willing participants? Can you just elaborate on that concept then?
Yeah, there's some nuance within that question. One is that we've taken a strong stance on de-identification of information. So you can't look up and pull up, someone else's information and say, I see this. But if 2 parties that want to be talking, then we would, just as we've done with any Kaufman Hall clients, whether you're coming to our fall conference, our winter software and data summit conference, or that you're part of certain councils that we've pulled together, et cetera, and or if you just already know each other, we're happy to facilitate that. But we also do take a strong stance on de-identification of information, so you're not just wandering through everyone else's information.
Very good. Another question, attendee wondering, what is the timing on having physician practice or provider comparisons?
Well, first, I got to say, this is a fantastic group. You guys are awake, you're engaged, and asking a lot of questions, which I love it. So you've made my day already. In terms of physicians, we're working on that right now. We want to be very careful. This is not survey data. We have well over 100,000 physicians data, and we're going to be very careful and roll it out. It is rolling out this year. I think it'll probably be late spring, early summer that we'll be rolling out that data pack, but we're not going to roll it out before it's ready, and I've signed off on it personally in terms of the quality of the data that you'd be receiving.
Very good. Another question, is there an option for an overall dashboard that red flags departments with KPIs outside of selected range or budget?
Well, I love the ask of that. In fact, I'm sitting here sort of chuckling. Were you guys in our strategy meeting yesterday of the next things that what we're planning on? That's some of the early adopters. That's already the kinds of things, and we love the client feedback. We're very open to it. Want to think about it, and that's right there on a more immediate type of thing that we're looking at, and we're actually working on right now in terms of design. Welcome you in to be part of that feedback and thoughtfulness, and that would be a this year thing that we're going to add. We also have already the version that we roll out right now. We welcome those, we passed early adopters. We're into the next sort of phase of it, and they got a lot of interest, but already know that the second version that we'll roll out with your type of feedback, that's going to be rolled out as is without fees or anything. It's not an upgrade. It's actually just part of it. So want people to know that we welcome that type of feedback.
Very good. We are, I think, at time now for today then, so we'll go ahead and wrap. I appreciate everyone's participation and interest, and if we did not address your question specifically during today's live session, we'll be certain to follow up with you afterwards and address it with you offline. So again, I want to thank you all for your participation. Again, thank you, Jim and Eric, for the overview, and we will talk with you all again soon.
Thank you very much. Again, have a great day, everybody.